Welcome to the Dealing with Goliath podcast. The mission of Dealing with Goliath is to sharpen the psychological edge in negotiation, ethical influencing, and high impact conversations for business leaders who want to be more effective under pressure, uncover hidden value, and build greater connection and business relationships, all while increasing profitability. This is the short form espresso shot of insight podcast interview to boost business performance using our 5 questions in around about 15 to 20 minutes format. My guest today is Dr. J. Rodriguez. Dr. J helps people communicate better, clearly, authentically, and inclusively. Messaging is tricky. Figuring out what to say, how to say it, and how to truly connect, whether with your team, clients, or a broader audience, can feel overwhelming. And that's where Dr. J comes in. With the mind of a scientist, the heart of a coach, and the strategy of a seasoned communicator, he transforms messaging from a challenge into an opportunity. Through workshops, presentations, and consulting, he helps organizations and individuals craft powerful, ethical, and effective communications. A master educator with over 20 years of experience, Dr. J has worked with corporations, universities, and even survivors of abuse, one of his greatest honors. His expertise lies in message development, leadership, presence, and audience engagement that truly resonates. Dr. J, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Wonderful introduction, and it's always a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you so much for coming along. So I'm eager to get into it because we were talking before we hit record there. I was like, oh, we're missing some good stuff here. So tell us, just to start off, give people a little bit of context. Who's your ideal client and what sort of challenges do they tend to face?
Absolutely. So my ideal client are business professionals, sometimes executives, sometimes HR leaders, and at times even supervisors or managers that are looking to structure communications in ways that work for the greater good. And that takes on a variety of forms. Sometimes people in an organization are not communicating effectively. Literally, they're not communicating, they're not sharing information, they're not being transparent, or people are engaging in a lot of conflict for whatever reason. They're not understanding each other, they're not building rapport, they're messaging over each other, or there are other similar challenges of that nature. So when there are those challenges in place, I come in and usually try to have a conversation with stakeholders and see what are the challenges, what are they looking at, and then through those processes of basic conversations and gathering information, I then structure interventions that could be one-on-one training, it could be workshops, it could be extended consultation sections or sessions where people come together, collaborate, and start to communicate in ways that work for the greater good.
That's an interesting phrase because I was going to pick up on the greater good there, Dr. J, because you said it at the start and then very interestingly at the end. So, how to put this? I take it by that an awful lot of organizations, the individuals, are not acting in the greater good. Can you just expand on what that might look like for a moment?
Absolutely, yeah. So this that I'm about to say is fairly obvious in
Right.
modern times. We've become very self-centered as a world and as individual cultures, right? We've become very narcissistic. There's no other way to describe it. Therefore, when people are very self-centered and very much in survival mode, which
Mhm.
in many ways is understandable, there is a lack of concern for the greater good. And so people become focused excessively on what it is that they need to do for their own self-centered gain. As soon as that starts to happen throughout an organization, we stop focusing on the larger good or the greater mission, and we start to cultivate more individual interests that then starts to pull us apart. As long as we're
Mhm.
staying on mission, we tend to work better. This is also very much a part of, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Ian McGilchrist, excuse me, and he talks about the different hemispheres of the brain having different focuses or different modes of attention.
Hmm.
So our left brain tends to be very focused on minute, logical, minimal steps. And our right hemisphere tends to be much more global, holistic, and empathic. And when we work at our best, what we're doing is we're going back and forth in
Mm.
our hemispheric functioning. We look at the broader picture using a more right brain orientation, a bigger picture, an empathic picture of the greater or larger mission for us or the university or sorry, or the organization, right?
Hmm.
And then we focus on very specific steps for articulating or driving that mission. And that is a much more left hemispheric function. And notice I'm not talking about superiority or inferiority of
Hmm.
any mode. I'm talking about working together collaboratively in an interplay that
Hmm.
allows us to look at the greater good and then bring it into focus through specific action.
Right, very interesting. I mean, because it does, as you said, when it makes sense, if you don't trust other people to also
Yeah,
act in the greater good,
yeah,
then it makes sense for you to just take care of you. And that
yep,
then you have all these, as you said, individuals walking around. To just to go again, just to double down on that, I take it there's a very good business case for this. That, you
yeah,
can't have a high performing team which is just full of individuals thinking about
yeah,
themselves, right?
right.
So, this has been proven by everyone from Google to every other
Yeah,
massive corporation that
yes.
people have to actually have a collective vision that is in alignment with their own, right? So, as you said, it's not just about giving up for the group, it's about aligning with the group, right? With the others.
Exactly. And I think you make a very, valid point that at this point in our history is self-evident, correct? And we're just stating the obvious. I think a while back, years ago when the United States went to the Olympics and they had all these NBA superstars on the team, they thought, "Oh my gosh, this is a dream team," and blah blah
Mm,
blah. But at first, all of these individuals, all these individuals were acting as self-interested persons, right? They weren't
mm,
really working as a team, and understandably so, because they all just kind of came in at the last minute, didn't have any team chemistry, didn't have like a team mission, and they lost. It
mm,
was quote unquote embarrassing. I just thought it was funny, but then they had to come back and redo that whole process by creating a sense of mission, creating a sense of
exactly.
solidarity, creating a sense of how to work together and understand how the game works at the Olympics,
Hmm.
which is different than the way the game works in the
In the
NBA.
NBA,
And
yeah.
all that created a much more successful team experience because people were not coming in as a bunch of great superstars who were individually very good, but instead now we have a team of cohesive people who are good, but are great because they come together for a larger mission, which
Hmm.
is win the Olympic Games or represent your country or some larger ideal
Hmm.
that then really helps us align, as you said, that's a great word, align our own individual efforts with the larger team, the larger mission, or the larger goal.
Outstanding. It's a great example, exactly. But it was that lovely point that people just presumed there was this, oh, but of
Yeah.
course, they're all such awesome players. They're going to be great together. Just throw them in a room and they'll be fine. It doesn't work
Yeah.
like that. And that's
Mm,
often the case that a well-drilled team of lesser skilled athletes will often beat, superstars who aren't actually cohesive together. But to move on to the next question, so what are some of the common mistakes people make when they're trying to solve the problems that you're talking about? So someone in an organization, as you said, they're seeing some of these symptoms, that people are very for themselves and they're not gelling, they're usually doing the job description or for their own more self-regard, self-centered goals. What can they do about that? What are some of the mistakes that they usually make trying to solve that?
Well, again, the mistake is exactly the I don't know, the symptom or the ongoing dilemma that we're seeing, right? So organizations will then continue the problem by focusing on the individual. So they will have a conversation with the person, they will intervene with the person, and the manager will talk to the person. And then notice how we're focusing on the individual who is engaging in bad behavior. And don't get me wrong, there is definitely value in that. Sure,
Hmm.
we need to talk to somebody. Sure, we need to have a conversation. Sure, it is helpful to let someone know when they're engaging in behavior that's not productive. There's no question that that's helpful. But what's also equally helpful is to address the larger issue, which is what I call, or we often call, the elephant in the room, what nobody's talking about. And that is that our team culture is bad because we don't have a unifying mission, or because everybody's running around doing their own thing, or because we're being rewarded for our individual effort, not really for our
Hmm.
collective efforts, or because our organization is inherently narcissistic and competitive, and then therefore we're seeing the results of that narcissistic competitiveness that is driving us apart. And so I think some organizations have a perpetual blind spot with regard to their own larger culture or their specific team cultures, and it's very difficult for them to remedy that
Hmm.
cultural blind spot because they don't see it, they don't want to see it, or they really are committed to just moving forward the way that it is because there's no changing it. Sometimes they're just stuck. They're just stuck. And many wise organizations or smaller organizations that are a little bit more agile will actually take the time to pause, stop, look at what's going on, and then start to change behaviors by beginning honest conversations about, hey, let's have a conversation about our mission. Let's get on the same page. Let's work together. Let's build a sense of solidarity. So that way we are much more aligned as people and less self-absorbed.
Outstanding, outstanding. You reminded me there of a thing I saw on Microsoft when it was at one of its lowest market caps, and it was going in a nosedive before a new CEO came in and took over and changed the culture. And it was
Yeah.
exactly that. They were incentivizing individualism
Yeah.
to the point where, they would give massive bonuses to the top 10%, very much the Jack Welch style in the 80s. It's incentivize the top people, and the last people either get moved or fired. And I mean, you can almost feel the survival instincts, how even sometimes people would be scuppering each other's work. So it was a very thin reed of a gain for Microsoft. And
Yeah.
the new CEO came in, changed everything around, and said, "No, we're aligning team, all this sort of idea."
Yeah, exactly. The way incentives are distributed is a great example, right? If a team is rewarded, right, for their efforts, okay, our team achieved XY result, and we all get rewarded for that result, then there is an incentive for working together. But
Hmm.
if my manager is the only person that gets rewarded, or the director is the only person that gets rewarded for our collective efforts, then all of a sudden people don't feel like they're working for the greater good, or the greater good is being recognized in very tangible ways. So that just makes total sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what is one valuable free action that the audience could implement that will help with this issue? So, it mightn't solve it, but it'll at least start moving people on the right trajectory.
I think that something free and not so easy to do is just to have a conversation with people. I mean, what is going on, what's happening, and open the floor for conversation, honestly, about what's happening. And then after that conversation, to find out what's happening and what the issue is and what people are experiencing, then really create a plan for making some changes. And you just gave the example of Microsoft as a great example, right?
Mm.
These ideas are not revolutionary. They're pretty straightforward. You find out what the problem is through conversation, and then you have a sense of maybe, I don't know, brainstorming possible solutions. What are the top three solutions that might work for the team? Ask people of these three solutions, which ones do you think might be most applicable, or maybe all three? Great, let's go with that one. And then we attempt slowly to implement those changes in ways that are collaborative, in ways that help people, in ways that work because we've collaborated with others. We've had the conversation, right? We've brainstormed possible solutions. We've picked maybe three and then encouraged our team to self-select
Mm.
which one of those strategies would
Well,
work best for them.
there's something I was going to
They,
pick up on. Yeah, the
right? Yeah.
agency. You're not telling them again. It's not the telling, it's the collaborative. You're living the collaboration, not just talking about it. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. When people feel that they're part of the collaboration, they're much more likely to be invested in the process, even though it might be challenging, even though it might be a little bit, weird, or there might be a learning curve of 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it is.
Hmm.
There is buy-in to that particular plan of action, and therefore it's much more likely to succeed.
Outstanding, outstanding. And what might be one valuable free resource that you could direct people to that would help with that?
I think give me a call, right? A free 30-minute consultation. That's totally free. And obviously, these things that we're talking about are
Hmm.
not revolutionary, right? We've heard of these processes before. The idea is that we don't follow best practices. We know what they are, right? Talk to people, gather information, brainstorm a little bit about what might be a viable solution, pick one or two that is
Hmm.
in alignment with the team, and then go and implement that. This is not rocket science, right? This is free, this is available, this is business management 101, consulting 101, marketing 101, business 101, whatever you want to call it, psychology 101, intervention 101. We know these things, but we don't implement them because we're too busy, because it's hard to change, because it's awkward to have the conversation. So these are all very free, very user-friendly choices that people
Hmm.
can make,
As
you
you
know.
say, it is a great start, but I have to respectfully push back on you on that one. They are somewhat obvious. I completely concur with that. But the amount of businesses, sometimes medium-sized business, sometimes large multinationals I've gone into, where from the instruction on above to do a certain training with people, because I remember one group, they were encouraged to push back more against other group stakeholders within the company, right? And they were like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it became this thing where it was like, hold on, okay, you're hearing it, you get it, but and then one of them finally honestly says, I don't believe them.
Right.
They would that's what they say, but if we do this, there will be repercussions, and then that'll be back on us all the worse.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right?
I agree with you. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's it. I mean, that was the point, just to throw that, roll that back at you, and because
Oh,
that's the reality of an awful lot of those problems that, oh yeah, we'll have conversation, and you're dead right, that is the start. But when there's that lack of trust because it hasn't been earned yet or it's been burnt through, when there's those sort of marketing speak, to get people in the door to the job, and then the reality is distinctly different, uh, because that's often the way it is. The culture doesn't match what was sort of sold to them in the interview or whatever. What are your thoughts then? How do you approach starting to build that trust again?
all right. So in my experience, there's only three ways to do it,
Mm,
and that's it. One is to start the conversation or have a
right?
conversation with the person. And we've talked about how that works. Two is to change the situation or change the dynamic of the team or the organization. And we've talked in general about how that works or that how that could work. And the last one, which is I think the one that we're getting to, which is pretty obvious as well, is to leave, to check out, to go to another organization or go to another team. So
Mm,
I've discovered that those are the only ways. One, conversation, right? We start a conversation, a dialogue.
mhm,
Two, we try to change the situation by changing the culture, changing the dynamic, changing the way that we do things on a team. That's changing context. But sometimes those things are just not possible. So
mhm,
then we have to exit the scene. We need to leave, let's say, that team or that region. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you leave the organization, but maybe that particular team or that particular unit or that segment of the market is just not a good fit for you, or it's a toxic environment.
mm,
And then you go to a different segment or a different unit in the organization, or you just leave the organization altogether because that organization, for whatever reason, is not aligned with your values. And I think that when we approach it from that perspective, hey, I'm going to have a conversation with the person and see how it goes. We're going to try to change the situation and do the best we can. But when that doesn't work, listen, we have the option to leave and to pivot and
mhm.
to change. And I think that everybody can respect that, right? And some of us might say, well, I need to stay because I need the job and I can't help it. And I can't, I'm the breadwinner for my family. I understand and I get it. And some of us are kind of stuck in those kinds of situations.
Mhm.
Just realize that, that's the reality and the organization may not change. I've seen that happen very, very often.
Absolutely, absolutely. Some great advice there. As you said, for some people, it's nearly the golden handcuffs where I have
Yeah.
one particular client who's grossly overpaid compared to other jobs he could get, but it's a highly toxic environment. But that's the atmosphere that he's there, and it pays a lot of bills, so it's hard to drop that. Yeah, it's very difficult. So what would be?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you were about to say
Yeah,
something
yeah,
there. Sorry,
exactly. I mean,
Dr. J.
right. That's a great example. That's a great example. It's just a reality, right? That's why I gave that
Mm,
as a general example, and then you gave me a very specific example of
mm,
someone who is earning a lot of money, but they're in a toxic environment. But the money, the compensation is, how shall I say, paying a lot of bills. That was your words, which is
mm,
great. So you decide to stay. Cool, we get it. We get it. But sometimes that's the price of admission, right?
mm,
You live or work in a very high-paced environment that is very toxic or very high pressure, but it pays a lot of money and you like the lifestyle that allows you to have. So you're making a choice, and that is completely understandable and completely valid, even though at times or many times you might be miserable, but you want the money. There it is, right? Yeah. Boom.
absolutely. So what would be your number one insight or principle on how to negotiate or build rapport and connection with clients? What would be your
Perfect.
advice to them there?
Perfect. Yeah. So and we've been talking about it. So I'm going to talk about
Sure.
the three central themes, right? Kind of summarizing a bit of what we've been saying. Connect, relate, belong. I
Mm,
think about as those three key features that we've been talking about explicitly and collectively here. To connect is to have a moment of impact with another person, and that could be done non-verbally through eye contact. To relate is to have a moment of exchange, a very simple verbal conversation. And the last piece is belonging, where we really acknowledge the humanity of another person. So when we connect with someone authentically through eye contact, for example, and then we follow up through a simple verbal exchange or a conversation. We have an exchange that's meaningful. And then we recognize that person for their essential humanity. We don't objectify them, we don't
mm,
treat them as an object. When we do those three things, we are much more likely to establish a sense of rapport,
mm.
establish a sense of connection, establish a sense of solidarity that then we can use to build on whatever we're doing for the greater good. But if I don't connect with the other person and I don't really have a moment of exchange and I don't help them feel a sense of belonging because I'm not seeing them as a person. I'm denying their essential humanity. It's going to be very difficult to create any kind of rapport, any kind of connection, any kind of solidarity. And again, we could live on in misery because we're making a lot of money and we need to pay the bills, but it's not going to be the kind of atmosphere or environment or culture where we're going to be happy in the long term. And that's really a
Mhm.
shame.
Absolutely. Beautifully put there. And I love that we had been talking about this before we hit record, which was, I think it was the Schopenhauerian idea that, treating someone as a means to themselves rather than a means to an end, right? It's that idea. And as you said, these things are nearly cliche, but how often do people fall into that trap? How often do
Yes.
they forget to actually take a moment and engage on a human level rather than just talking to someone as part of a task I need to complete? Right.
Yeah, treating people as a means to an end is a great example, right? Treating people as objects, treating people as just like a number.
Mhm.
And that is very dehumanizing. I mean, we talk about it as objectification. There's a word for that, and it feels very dehumanizing. And I mention that and I talk about that and I emphasize that because we see that happening in our society, in our world more and more. So when people feel unhappy, when people feel depressed, when people feel a sense of loneliness, it's because of this larger sense that's occurring or this larger behavior that we're seeing in the world of people being very self-absorbed, people being on automatic pilot, people not really going back and forth in their hemispheric interplay, right? From the larger picture to the smaller picture to empathy to pursuing a particular objective, which are all part of the holistic way we operate as human beings. And the more we narrow in one particular area by getting excessively focused, the more we lose our humanity, we lose our connection to other people, and then there are negative effects of that we've seen not only in our own lives, but in the larger life of the planet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Dr. J. So
You're welcome.
tell us, where can people get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Well, I'm on social media, mostly on LinkedIn, just because
Mhm.
that's where I tend to get most engagement. So you can find me
Absolutely.
on LinkedIn, Dr. J. Rodriguez, PhD. Very easy to find there on LinkedIn. I'm also available through my website. It's www.joserodriguez.solutions. Why? Because .com was taken and .org was taken and all the other whatevers
That's
were
fine.
taken and solution was the only one that was available. So if
Fair
it
enough.
sounds funny or weird,
That's
that's
quite
just the one
okay.
that they
That's quite
gave me.
okay.
And that's the way to reach me. I'd love to connect with anyone who's very interested in this topic. Reach out and let's have a conversation. Thank you for asking.
Outstanding stuff. Thank you so much. Cheers, Dr. J.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to connect with you and a wonderful dialogue as always.
Cheers.